Hi everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining our session today. Session titled "Setting the Foundations in AI Success for EHS Plus: Organizational Considerations for AI." My name is Stu. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager with Cority, and I'm delighted to be joined with you today. And I am also joined by Chris Sayers from Verdantix. Chris is a Senior Manager at Verdantix. His current research agenda targets enterprise AI integration and adoption, AI market trends, and Agentic AI. Chris joined Verdantix in 2020, where he focused on EHS software, and has previous experience at EY, where he specialized in robotic precision process automation. He holds a Master's in Engineering Science from the University of Oxford, with a focus on machine learning and machine vision. Thank you for joining me today, Chris. Just a quick note to viewers that throughout we are going to have poll questions, which we will invite you to kind of participate on just live on screen. We'll talk through those as they come up, but also you can ask Q&A via the Q&A widget on screen. It should be on the right-hand side of your screen. We will save time at the end and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can, so please do engage. And with that, I'm delighted to hand over to Chris to kick off the session.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Stuart, for the introduction. Let's jump straight in. So very excited to speak with you all today around how AI is reshaping EHS, and we'll also focus on actionable takeaways for EHS leaders to succeed when you're trying to roll out AI within your function. And as a reminder, a lot of this is based on Verdantix market research. So to talk through the agenda for today, I'll start by setting the scene for what is happening within the enterprise AI software landscape. There are lots of broader trends which are also applicable to EHS software. I'll then speak to why the future of EHS is AI. Of course, there are a lot of hesitancies, a lot of risks. Obviously, within this space, we are concerned with people data, human lives, safety. However, there are lots of positive forces driving the adoption of AI right now, and I'll particularly highlight those. I'll then speak directly to the influence this is having on EHS software buying processes in terms of how are priorities shifting, how are the key personas involved in procurement decision changing, and what do those personas care about? And then we'll talk about getting the foundation right. So all of this is fantastic, but what should you really be prioritizing to succeed in the long term? And particularly keen to cut across a lot of the hype and kind of marketing language which you hear on this topic, and we'll have a really kind of grounded, practical conversation. I do also want to have time for Q&A. We have lots of you attending on this webinar that have signed up. It'll be great to really get your active engagement, so please do ask away throughout. If we can't answer on the call now, we'll try to get back to you after. And then also we do have polls dotted in around, so just to make sure you're very much engaged with the content and not just listening to myself. Stuart will be jumping in from time to time. However, let's get started. So I wanted to start by setting the scene today. So essentially every SaaS category is under the same structural pressure right now. And the data tells us that EHS is actually one of the categories where that pressure is translating into real change. It is not just talk. So if we look on the left-hand side, we have a whole bunch of ways in which this pressure is kind of leaning down on enterprise SaaS. And we can bucket these into maybe three different areas. One is commercial pressures. So there's pricing model disruption and kind of buy versus build pressure that software vendors are feeling. We also have a kind of technical pressure. So many vendors in this space are talking about, or maybe making the decision whether not to go through a kind of architecture and re-platforming effort. Every single vendor in the market is talking about AI product integration. Sometimes this is very much layered on top, LLM wrappers, and largely a marketing effort. In other cases, there's real technical depth behind that integration. And some are bolting on onto kind of legacy data models that weren't designed to use AI. And we appreciate that from a buyer perspective, it can be very difficult to understand who's kind of really walking the walk when it comes to that technical depth. And then there's also that existential pressure that vendors are facing, whether it's displacement from AI first challengers and also some of the model providers directly, plus the governance and roadmap credibility problems that come with trying to respond to all of this. And this is the box that should land the hardest. The threat isn't only point solution startups anymore. We're starting to see the foundation model providers themselves moving up the stack, developing applications. And so the question also becomes, what's the moat for EHS platform vendors as well? If we move to the right-hand side, this is where we can really dive into the evolution of the enterprise technology stack. The data that I'm sharing here is from a Verdantix global corporate survey that we held in 2025, where we spoke with 352 senior decision makers spanning IT, data, and AI roles. You can see at the top of the chart here, the enterprise collaboration software, the business intelligence platforms. These are the kind of stay put categories, right? Here, we have a larger number of respondents saying that we expect the ecosystem to remain the same. And as we move further down, these are the enterprise software solutions that where we see there's more openness to disruption. And if we focus in on EHS specifically, here we had 15% of respondents expect their ecosystem to remain the same. We have 39% of firms saying we want to upgrade to use inbuilt AI features from our existing commercial system. And we have 33%, so 1/3, saying we are considering migrating functionality to a commercial AI first platform. So essentially, the buyers themselves are directly telling us that there's widespread demand for AI to be embedded within their ecosystem. And that is fundamentally going to change the way buyers are approaching software procurement, whether that's upgrading with your existing vendor, if you're happy with the developments and their AI roadmap. And it's also a kind of forcing factor to look elsewhere, particularly given some of the constraints that we see in the EHS market. So before diving into this, I do want to spend 1 minute just level setting the terminology. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, agents have been at the center of the enterprise software AI innovation discussion for some time now. And we're just at the stage where we're moving from experimentation to scaled enterprise rollouts of agents. And we do also see that these three terms on screen are being used interchangeably. And essentially, as EHS professionals, decision makers, it's extremely important to have a close handle on these terms. So starting with agentic AI, this is the umbrella term. It's the architectural context. It's not a product, it's more of a branch of AI that's focused on systems that can perceive, reason, and act towards a goal without a human directing every step. Underneath that umbrella sit two different shapes. So we have an AI agent, and that is the basic unit. That's when we have one software system that perceives its environment and can act autonomously towards a defined objective. And then we have multi-agent systems. And this is what you get when you have several of those agents that are coordinated together. Some might be specialist agents that are handing off work to other agents. Agents can negotiate, they can combine capabilities the way a team would, rather than one agent trying to do everything. So if a vendor is telling you they have agentic AI and you're a buyer, the next question should really be, is that one agent doing one job, or is it a coordinated system of several agents? And that distinction changes everything when it comes to the level of governance that you should expect in the system, the failure modes, and what you're actually buying as well. So we're going to be talking about that today. And really the kind of takeaways here today is that if you're an EHS professional engaging with software and some way involved in software decision making, you really need to understand these and also the implications of each, particularly when it comes to the guardrails and the risk of using agents. Great. So with that kind of baseline introduction out the way, I really want to move on to why the future of EHS is AI. And I'm sure many of you on the call might disagree with that statement as well. So if you have strong feelings, please make them known in the Q&A. But let's talk about what some of the positive influences are for this and also some of the EHS specific cautions. To level set here, clearly EHS is not the most digitally mature business function. We work, and I work extensively with large organizations, supporting them in their EHS digital strategy. We're so aware of the fragmentation in terms of tech ecosystems for EHS. Quite often, organizations have tens, sometimes hundreds of different solutions. We still see a lot of paper-based processes. We still see a lot of Excel and a lot of legacy solutions. And so generally compared to other functions, yes, digital maturity is low. And there are also very specific cautions here. So for instance, when it comes to EHS, you're handling very sensitive data, often personal health information. The outcome, and this is can be highly consequential. And this is so dependent on the use case. And so you really have to consider the latest legislation here, whether it's the EU AI Act, and have a proper process around assigning risk to your use cases. There's also a risk of eroding subject matter expertise and de-skilling. There's also a kind of liability component for AI-generated content. We've also seen blind spots due to training data being too narrow. So if you have AI as part of your system and it's providing recommendations, what if the recommendations it's providing are not in a wide enough data set, or if that data set is biased in some way and it's not actually supporting the EHS professional? And then there's also a massive one here, which is that data and digital maturity dependency. So for AI to really work well, that data foundation needs to be complete, it needs to be accurate. And so often when we work with large organizations, that isn't there. And so actually to get this all working as it should be, there's a massive undertaking, which is that kind of precursor where you have to really sort out your data and make sure you're collecting it consistently. However, there are several positive influences on the market, and we're in this kind of odd space where even in legal, for instance, highly regulated, you would think it might be slow to adopt AI, but because of the large volumes of unstructured data, a real dependency on paying for people's time, it's been very quick to adopt AI, and we see this in the EHS space. So for instance, there are lots of highly manual workloads that require efficiency improvements and automation. AI can support there. We also see large volumes of distributed documentation, and that is a massive opportunity for AI. So for instance, you might have safety data sheets, permit, regulatory text. How can we make all of this information searchable so that we can query it really easily? We improve access to EHS information. How can we surface analytics based on all of this information, which might have historically been siloed? Huge opportunities there. We also see more potential for AI to augment human decision making. Additionally, EHS is often under-resourced, necessitating time-saving tools. And so if you use AI correctly, and actually now you're freeing up time for some of those really precious EHS resources to focus on value-added tasks and to really focus on, for instance, reducing SIF rates within your organization. That would be the ultimate goal. Additionally, improving oversight through continuous monitoring. There's massive potential there. So if we consider computer vision technologies, for instance, it's always on, it's constantly monitoring. We also have the ability to identify unsafe behaviors before they materialize as events. So it's that kind of predictive element as well that we see on the bottom bullet point there. And at this stage, Stuart, I might hand to you as we move into the first of our poll questions. Sorry, Stuart, I'm not hearing you.
a good call out. I'm glad. I'm glad that you told me.
Good.
Oh, everybody, with that technical snafu aside, so you should see on screen the question and a bunch of answers that you can click and select live on screen. So the question is, to what extent has your firm rolled out AI for EHS? Already widely rolled out across the organization, partially rolled out looking to increase, partially rolled out not looking to further disseminate technology, i.e. no more AI agents or anything along those lines, partially rolled out and looking to reduce the use of the technology, piloting technology just in the very early stages, or no plans to roll out at all. And the reason that we're asking this will become very clear in the immediate slide. So I will, so if people start clicking on these,
Yeah, so really interested to see what kinds of breakdown we get for this. So please do be really active in answering this poll question for us.
There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Technical snafu. I was looking for the answers. Here we go. So this should update live as we get more answers. But Chris, interested to get your take on what we're seeing. So the majority so far are in piloting, and then second up with nearly 20% is partially rolled out, looking to increase, and just behind that is no current plans to roll out. So does that align with kind of what you've been seeing as you talk to customers from across industries?
Interesting. So in some ways, yes, in other ways, no. So that kind of top figure with very, very few firms saying they've already widely rolled out AI across the organization, that's exactly to be expected. I actually don't think I've encountered any firm that says, yeah, we've kind of got AI SaaS figured out. There's always opportunity with it. What is great to see is the extent to which people are going to be increasing the rollout of AI. So we have now, okay, 2/5 saying we're piloting. And that's a great stage to be, right? One of the things which we hear a lot in this space is this idea of being stuck in pilot purgatory. And that's what you really need to avoid. It's very quick to spin up a pilot and see results. In some ways, it's quite easy. The big challenge is to take that piloting phase and apply it within your organization and scale it and start to see results. Because really, if it's applied at a small scale, we're not really achieving what it is we want to, and we're not applying AI for the sake of it. It needs to be grounded in a business problem. So the main takeaway for me in this is, how can we shift those of you that are in that piloting phase to more of a scaled rollout? Not sure if you have any thoughts to add, Stuart.
No, I think that's really interesting too. I totally agree with you. I would have been shocked if the already widely rolled out was any higher than it is, because as you were saying, we see a lot of people kind of, there's certainly no lack of appetite, which I think is something that you are going to talk about too. And I don't want to steal any thunder from the research there, but actually getting, firms that have everything figured out is below a minority. It is very, very small. It's really cool to see piloting technology is so widely used because, as you were saying again, I see a lot of EHS, professionals currently, frustrated by the fact that they are unable to even get to that stage, that that they've been stuck trying to get a pilot program together. So it's really cool to see that that's not the case with this group, particularly, that we have had people move on from the I can't even get a pilot program put together. And there are so many reasons that happens to organizations. And again, I'm sure that will be discussed later, so I won't spend any more time ruminating on it. But there was a reason that we asked this question, was to align with some research that you had conducted, Chris. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so essentially we asked the same question, I suppose, to a slightly wider wider audience, where again we said, to what extent will your firm roll out AI for EHS in 2026? Actually, it's quite close, which is interesting. So supposedly the group which we asked were a little bit more mature. 8% said they'd widely rolled out, and we had 28% that were partially rolled out and looking to increase. But really, the key takeaways remain the same versus the group that we have with us on the webinar today. So widespread EHS AI automation remains a rarity, and that's to be expected. In some ways, it would be quite concerning if it was a high number, given the nascency of the technology and also the seriousness of the topic. However, we expect to see a huge amount of increase in use for AI in EHS this year. 61% in total, according to our data sets, which we collected independently. And additionally, kind of 1/3 of firms we see will be piloting AI in 2026. And only 18% have no plans to use AI for EHS. For those of you that said you have no plans, it would be very interesting to hear why, or even through the Q&A, if there's anything which is a kind of a real blocker for you. It'd be great even just to hear about that and the case, and perhaps we can address it in the Q&A. We do also see some segment-specific trends. So generally, organizations that are in higher risk sectors, so think about chemicals, mining and metals, oil and gas. For us, they're tending to show greater readiness to adopt AI. Part of that will be down to the improved maturity of their tech stack. If they're very high risk, often EHS tech, as long as processing people is a major priority for investment within that organization, and so they're a little bit quicker to adopt AI. We also see that large organizations have a more mature AI rollout. So particularly firms that are in that 10 billion plus revenue category, they're the organizations that have a very much defined enterprise-wide AI strategy, and EHS is wrapped up in that. Whereas the smaller firms, we recognize that sometimes the priority is more around those low-hanging fruits, and sometimes it's simply digitizing rather than progressing forward with AI. Okay, so all of that is very, I suppose, very open-ended in terms of, okay, we're adopting AI, it's increasing, it's decreasing. What specifically are you actually doing? I think sometimes research and marketing materials glosses over that as well. So what I'm sharing on screen is a Verdantix independent segmentation of prominent AI use cases we see in the EHS market. We segment these into 4 areas. So the first is data management. So this is the use of AI across data management processes, whether it is extracting data, inputting it, some of the aggregation process for reporting, quality enhancement, insight generation, and analysis. There's plenty of use cases here. You can see some specific examples. So for instance, user prompts for more complete data entry. So if I'm writing an incident description, is AI helping me to write something which is more complete? It could also be for data set aggregation. So mapping exercises if data's split across lots of different siloed data lakes or data warehouses. Then we also have proactive risk management. So this is the application of AI to support the identification and mitigation of EHS risks before they materialize as events. A really core technology to this is computer vision, and there are lots of interesting specialists that are operating in that market. It could also be machine learning being applied to data sets to predict chemical hazards as well. So lots of different opportunities there. We also have a very large bucket, which we can consider workflow optimization and automation. So these are AI use cases that streamline EHS workflows, aim to deliver efficiency improvements or better outcomes. So a very fundamental one, which has rolled out across nearly all markets, and we frequently see in RFPs, is the need for a virtual assistant to provide prompts and guidance for users, quite often across the platform. So I'm sure that's one that everyone here is familiar with. It could also be to produce an executive summary of an event for you. It could be to process free text incident descriptions, to automatically populate fields in a form, or even natural language search and information discovery. So really supporting with just accessing the latest insights that I need in my role. And the final one is document AI. So I already called this out a little bit earlier. And this is where AI has been applied to extracting data insights from unstructured sources. So you're parsing PDFs, and you're then allowing natural language search of that information, whether it's regulatory content, internal EHS policies. So how can I take all this unstructured data, convert it into a structured format, which is easier for me to navigate and extract insights from? Fantastic. So now I also want to jump into agents, right? So previously I was talking about some very narrow use cases. Quite often the description and the line between what is an agent and what's just a narrow use case can be very blurry. But still, it's something which many of you on the call are encountering through vendor marketing material. And so it's worth talking about, okay, what are some of the examples of agents that you might expect to see in 2026? So these could be something like automated corrective action analysis. Image analysis is a big one. So can you extract data from images and autocomplete records? So say I'm completing an incident description form, I submit some pictures of the incidents, and you're using a vision language model to automatically populate an incident description. Computer vision, again, it could also be mapping risks to controls and offering updated views on risks. So again, all of these include some kind of task execution capability. It could also be data entry and system control through voice. So I just kind of talk to my mobile device, and it kind of identifies what I'm saying and auto populates a field based on me just kind of speaking with the mobile device. It could also be regulatory and legal agent to proactively address non-compliance risks. So advising me on what I need to address and the priorities and what I should do. So these are all examples of what we see in the market today. What does this look like next year or in kind of years moving on beyond that, so a 12+ month timeline? I would start to expect to see more of a kind of coordination of multiple agents. So maybe I have a higher level goal, and it then starts to trigger multiple EHS agents that do very specialist tasks and kind of filter up to me. And again, this is when, as an EHS professional, maybe the role starts to even change. Maybe I'm actually responsible for managing lots of agents as well as a team of people. We could also start to see some early examples of end-to-end automation. We will see automated execution of very low risk decisions. So again, given the criticality of EHS, we certainly won't see task automation for everything, but yes, maybe some low risk decisions with human in the loop will happen. And we might also start to see humans handle judgment and escalation. So AI is completing a lot of the work, which is relatively low risk. And as soon as there's a deviation from what's expected, it will escalate that to the human subject matter expert who can make that judgment call. Great. And actually, Stuart, of course, Cority is very active in this field through the use of Cortex, a release of that. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to add on this slide.
I mean, the things that I would say from a Cority customer standpoint, the people that I speak to, you were talking about human in the loop, and there have been questions in the chat already about agentic AI, etc., etc. Just to underline too, the thing that we are hearing from actual people out in the field, 2 years ago, perhaps, there was a general sense of like, can this stuff be trusted? And I think that that is slowly, going away because of companies like Cority making a real point of saying everything is human in the loop, that there is always a real person there making decisions, that AI does specific tasks, but it never does things on its own. It's always got supervision. And I don't think that that is going to go away. But it's interesting to be able to see that that is the case for what's presented here in 2027 plus vision, is that you'll notice none of the things here are it does everything on its own. It's still very specific about the things that AI is allowed to do and agents, what data agents have access to. So the kind of, less rules based and automated execution of low risk decisions, we are seeing that there is still very much a heavy tie back to human in the loop, which is, I think, will be music to the ears of most EHS professionals. Something that I say all the time, and if anyone on this call has ever been part of an AI discussion with me, because I do a number of these like you do, Chris, I'm sure you'll be tired of like my regular metaphor, but there's a really good reason that a human goes to medical school for 8 years. There's a really good reason that a human goes to law school for 8 years. Some decisions are not, should remain with humans, and I don't see that going away. What I will say is that it's cool that there are some things that we wouldn't have touched a year ago, that some things it was like, no, AI is still not ready to do that. But with more people using these tools, it is learning more, and we are able to automate certain things. So where previously absolutely every single aspect of AI was always human in the loop and always had to be, we are seeing that now the better these things get, the more lenient people can be like, okay, well, what is absolutely human in the loop? Another good kind of parallel to say is that decades ago, would you have trusted a computer to remember all of your passwords? Or would you have said, nope, robot bad, human good? And a very similar thing is happening with when we look at automated execution of low risk decisions and early examples of end-to-end automation. But with that, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you. No, really, really appreciate that additional bit of insight. So moving on to what does this all mean for the buyers of EHS software? The procurement process, the underlying assumptions hasn't really changed for a long time, and actually now AI is certainly disrupting that. So it'd be great to share with you some of the latest Verdantix research and how we see the procurement process changing. To start off with, I'll just share what we see happening in terms of EHS budget changes over the next 12 months. Key takeaways here, so 2/3 of EHS budgets are increasing, 27% are making double-digit spend increases, and we're also not seeing organizations decrease. What's the reason, or kind of what's the rationale behind this? Several driving forces. Of course, firms are very focused on a drive to zero SIFs, so they're investing specifically on that. Also, the regulatory landscape continue to evolve, drive spend changes, as well as a desire to improve oversight of subcontractors. However, through conversations with buyers, we're very much hearing that deploying AI and experimenting with it is part of that budget increase. So it is filtering into these real-world budgeting decisions. And with that, Stuart, I'll hand it again over to you for another poll question for everyone to kind of jump in on.
Thank you. And we're going to get the technology right this time. So number one, I came off of mute quick enough. And then second one, so we are going to sit with this for 1 minute to make sure that everybody has the chance to answer it. So the question is, when selecting EHS software, how much do AI-driven workflow automation and enhancement features influence your purchase decision? A, single most important aspect of the purchase. If it doesn't have it, not going anywhere near it. B, very important. C, important. It's good, it's necessary, it's good to have. D, not very important. We're not particularly swayed on it. And then E, of course, as always, is don't know. And while we wait for people to complete, Chris, I wondered if I can get your prediction. Which one of these things do you think you would be most expecting to see?
I think most will say that it's important. I
Okay.
don't really want to. I don't want to skew the results, but I think we'll see a lot kind of in and around the important space.
Mhm.
Acknowledging that it's a kind of very much a long-term consideration, but
Mhm.
interesting to see how how it stacks up.
Yeah. I am just for, like you said, not wanting to sway anybody. I would be looking in 2 and 3. I think that's where I'm hedging my bets in very important and important from the conversations that I have. So let's see what we've got. Okay, pretty even split. I feel pretty good about what I said. Chris, what do we think? What's your read here?
I think this is really encouraging, I suppose, from my perspective, right? To have 80% saying this is very important or important part of the procurement process is definitely an acknowledgement that AI, even if it's not a large part of the software that you use today, will be in the long term. Um,
Mm,
I think the main thing that I would advise clients that we speak with them is that, especially if you're a large organization and you're undergoing a kind of very wide platform procurement, there's a lot of pain, I suppose, involved in that. There's a lot of work to configure the software correctly. You really want to hang on to this for many years, ideally 10 plus. And so, even if it's not a large part of your workflow today, I think everyone acknowledges that the direction of travel is that it will be in a few years' time. And so, it must be a very important part of your purchasing decision in
mm,
2026. So,
mm.
yeah, like I think the audience gets it. Stuart, not sure if there's anything you want to add there.
Not necessarily on this, but you hit on a really good point. So I would be remiss if I didn't say to the people viewing, if you are interested in what Chris was saying about like, how do you even plan for this type of thing? For example, if there's somebody here that was part of the 11.5% don't know, and then heard what Chris was saying about like, well, how am I meant to know what I'm looking for in the next 10 years or so? I would highly encourage you to go to the Cority website in the resources tab because I was part of another webinar that spoke about building a business case and how do you even go about assessing software vendors as partners? Who do you look for? What questions do you ask, etc. And that fits very nice and neatly into the discussion. But enough about business cases. We will get back to talking about AI, and I'll hand back over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah, so again, I wanted to share recent survey data that we collected. So this time it's from a pool of 300 plus senior EHS decision makers. So think kind of heads, VPs of EHS, senior managers of EHS. So those that have really kind of strong decision making influence or the lead decision maker when it comes to selecting EHS software. And we asked them how important are the following criteria in terms of influencing your purchase decision. Really interestingly, so number one is platform architecture, scalability, and solution interoperability. Total cost of ownership also very high. Desktop and mobile user interface, very high. And that has been consistent for a very long time and actually sometimes tops this list. Industry expertise and strength of customer base is another important consideration. So buyers really want to know, okay, is this vendor in use by my key competitors? How much can we trust them? And then kind of fifth on this list, we have AI-driven workflow automation and enhancement features. So I would say, yeah, an important or very important kind of criteria for many people. And here in our survey, we had 50% saying this is important and 37% saying AI is very important to them. What I do want to draw your attention to is the importance trajectory prediction. So this is based on our own conversations, how we see the market progressing, essentially how we think each of these factors will progress in terms of importance over the next 1-2 years. I see platform architecture scalability continuing to be an extremely important aspect. As AI becomes a larger part of the procurement process, understanding the architecture of your vendor is essential. And so massive input from IT and data personas, and we'll talk about that next. Cost of ownership, always important when it comes to EHS, often perceived to be a cost function, a cost sink. There's always scrutiny on the price of these things. It's possible that desktop and mobile app might decrease slightly. It's always going to be important, but we might see more commoditization around the user interface. And instead, real differentiation will come up through the industry expertise of your vendor. So do they really understand me and my business? And then also AI-driven workflow automation. I think that will climb up this list as well. So if you have any questions on this, please do write it into the Q&A and we can try to address it at the end. However, moving swiftly on, I do also want to speak a little bit to the buyer personas that are involved in EHS procurement processes. So the typical process that I've seen for the past several years has been to have a EHS kind of steering committee, which is headed up by the head of EHS or VP of EHS, with input from operations, maybe some more junior EHS personas that are closer to the system. Procurement will have a big voice. IT and data will have a very big voice, mostly from a kind of technical security standpoint of the solution as well. However, when AI is a large part of the software, we're seeing the kind of voices and input change. And so some of these are more kind of traditional roles, like the chief risk officer will have an input here, same for the board of directors. Others are evolved. So we're seeing the IT and data lead, their role is expanding to include AI, data controls, and legal protection. We're seeing more input from security leads, so the threat of the kind of models that are in use, and also if there is an AI governance committee, they might also want oversight into the use cases within the system. And then even some entirely new roles. So some firms are kind of looking to adopt a chief AI officer who's a kind of very clear lead go-to persona that owns the AI strategy responsible for enterprise-wide adoption. And they're going to be very involved in the kind of model architecture, the roadmap of the vendor, and general interoperability with the rest of your enterprise stack from an AI lens. So lots of potential change out there. It's really useful to be aware of these positions and kind of what they will care about throughout the procurement process.
I wonder if you can take a minute to talk about the people that you've actually spoken to at these types of roundtables in terms of, for example, this chief AI officer. For EHS members of staff, they are one team of dozens at an organization. Chatting to specifically that type of buyer persona, what do you think are some of the things that, other than the priorities here, what do you think of the things that they are highly concerned about that they could use in their EHS business cases to elevate theirs as an essential, as an essential use case to look at?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I would say on the CAIO and also maybe for the IT and data leads. So lots of concern around data residency and the kind of models that are being used by the solution that you're looking to procure. Also, big focus on guardrails for agents. So how can I stop kind of runaway agent use, or how can I have also control over cost as well? What are the escalation pathways if agents start doing things that we don't like or risk the security? Especially given that they might well have access to very sensitive data sets. So they care a lot about that. Human in the loop will be really scrutinized, and they will be pushing for more robustness around that. And sometimes they might ask around the phrase kind of active human in the loop. So it's fine having humans in there to kind of click approve. Yep, that's fine. But laziness can creep in over time. And so they might ask, okay, well, how are you ensuring that humans are actually reading what AI has generated and not just blindly hitting approve because it hasn't raised any issues the past 5 times? So those are some, I suppose, very quick examples of where they might focus their attention.
That's great. Thank you.
No worries at all. Thank you for the question. I realize we are moving maybe a bit slowly, and I might have to speed up a little bit. So some of the strategic considerations, which are also creeping in, so I'll jump through these 4 very quickly. So the buyers in attendance really need to think about switching costs and vendor lock-in risk. So that's already a big deal in EHS software, but can be even more so when you consider that models are being trained on proprietary data, or even if you're using some kind of custom-built bit of technology to support AI that's more tailored to your organization, it might increase that risk of lock-in. We're also seeing new perspectives on ecosystem consolidation. So ecosystem consolidation has very much been a long-term goal, but AI is changing the way buyers are thinking about this. So you may want to kind of rationalize AI outputs. Having a unified data lake or lakehouse can support when it comes to AI as well. So it might drive even more of a push for ecosystem consolidation than what we have seen. Commercial models are also shifting. So the background here is that the status quo for a long time has been predictable year-on-year licensing contracts, whereas AI introduces some variable costs linked to the compute for the vendor. And vendors don't always want to absorb all of that margin squeeze, and so they might want to eventually pass this down to customers. And so you really have to consider, is this pricing model likely to change? How much variation will I experience? So that's more of an emerging trend. And then you might also want to rethink your out-of-the-box versus customization blend. So for a long time, there's been more of a push towards out-of-the-box configured functionality. But when it comes to AI, clients do like to have customized AI features that are specific to them. And we hear a lot more around co-development with your vendor to produce these features. And so there might be more of a customized element in the future than what the kind of trend we've seen recently. Okay, so now onto the kind of recommendations components. We've discussed the buyer changes in procurement processes. I really want to speak to you now about how to build your strategy, how to nail the foundations. So to begin with, we must start with a well-formed EHS AI strategy. You really need to ensure that the AI that you're pursuing, your goals are grounded in purpose. It has to deliver business value. There are several inputs to doing this. So the first is, and it's a fairly obvious step, is understand your ecosystem today. Quite often, buyers skip that as-is analysis. They don't really truly understand all of the systems in use, all of the ways in which they're causing problems, and hence all of the opportunities for AI. You need to have a top-down approach, so top-down input. So understand, what is your organization's AI strategy? What does the business today look like? What are your corporate objectives? And how will the business evolve over the next 5 years? So that when you do build your EHS strategy, it's aligned with the wider business. And then you also need a bottom-up perspective. So the likelihood is you have people within your organization who are already AI champions. They're already experimenting. They might have already built some tools for EHS. Those people are like gold dust. Make sure you speak to them, interview them, understand what's working, what isn't. Is there anything that you should be scaling that they've built? And once you've got all of those inputs, then you can start to build your AI strategy. Start thinking about your own vision and objectives. Define what success looks like for AI. And again, it must be linked to business outcomes. You should have some form of sophistication targets. You can think about the technologies and tools that you have access to, internal talent, your partner ecosystem, and crucially, your data strategy and infrastructure. And once you've done all of that, you can then start to think about, okay, how do we roll this out? How do we implement it? And what are the next steps beyond that from a roadmap perspective? Okay, so technology is really only half the picture. Often when thinking about AI, we spend too much time talking about the technology, but this cannot be led by the tech. It cannot be led by IT. Um, the EHS persona has to have input, and often the real kind of bottleneck within organizations isn't the level of sophistication of the AI. It's actually the change management. It's the people. It's the process. There are some really key messages on this slide. So if we do focus on the tech firstly, what do we know that works well? And again, this is based on conversations with both IT, AI leads as well as EHS. AI has to be embedded within existing workflows for EHS. It cannot add friction. It needs to be frictionless. It's really important to have explainable results. So if AI is surfacing insights, can I click through to see the underlying source data so that I can fully trust this and I know it's not hallucinating? I already mentioned this idea of active human in the loop. It's very important to have built-in EHS domain expertise, and then governance controls, guardrails, essential, must prioritize. From a people and process perspective, I won't talk through all of this, but I do just want to emphasize change management. EHS functions and users of software, I think it's fair to say, can be very set in their ways. Even a kind of direct rip and replace of software can involve a big change management lift. When AI is involved and mentioned, I think even more so, there's definitely a lot of perceived risk there. So you really have to involve all levels of the EHS function early and really pull them along on that process. Okay. And I did also want to share some of the factors which are slowing adoption. And this data is really valuable in understanding where to focus your efforts and where to overcome. The one that I will highlight, and again, so this is a survey where we spoke with IT, data, AI professionals. So cybersecurity, data privacy, number one. The cost of Gen AI also really, really high up there. For the EHS persona, highly sensitive personal data, health data is being stored. So that cybersecurity component is massive. So you really, really need to quiz your vendors there. And then also inadequate performance, reliability, explainability, that increases up the list. So we're talking about critical decisions relating to people's health. You require certainty in outcomes. And then finally, at the very bottom, insufficient enterprise architecture and data readiness. I've already discussed how EHS functions are not known for data quality excellence. And so it's very likely that a starting point for you in this strategy is going to be fixing your data. So what does that look like? What are the foundational steps you need to focus on? I've isolated this down to 4. So the first one I really want to highlight is the technical and data foundation. Look to consolidate your data, look to improve its quality, consistency, and governance. The next one is internal AI talent. So really look to develop AI literacy across EHS individuals, those using software. Guardrails and security. So have you even got policies in place? How are you protecting data that is sensitive? And the fourth one is then aligning this with kind of organizational readiness. And the main piece I want to highlight here is change management. Have you brought everyone along this journey? Have you polled them? Have you used workshops? Have they had their inputs into what a future EHS ecosystem should look like from an AI perspective? So just in the interest of time, I will skip past this slide and leave you with 3 core takeaways before we move into some questions. So the first is AI is the future of EHS. It's very clear based on my own analysis of the market, the direction of vendors such as Cority, but also the entire market. They're very quickly moving to embed AI, and for good reason. It can bring lots of really important benefits as long as you use it wisely. The second is, as you look to update your ecosystem, buyers are really going to need to adapt their existing procurement process. EHS RFPs should include AI as a high priority item. It's a long-term consideration, but that does mean you also need to involve new individuals in the decision-making process. whether that is your CISO or your CAIO. And you also need to consider the disruption from new pricing models as well. And the third is you need to nail the foundations for this to work. So that really means look closely at your data and tech architecture. Excellence is the strategic imperative. Consider your current AI talent pool and any organizational knowledge gaps to make this happen. And make sure change management is at the center of everything you do. There is no good rolling out really strong AI functionality if you haven't got the buy-in of the users. Ultimately, it has to be grounded in tech that is going to help them in their role and drive a positive impact in terms of improving safety metrics for your organization. And with that, apologies for going very, very quickly, but Stuart, I will hand back to you and we might have time to answer one or two questions.
Sounds great. Thanks, Chris. So I tell you what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put a poll question on screen. People can answer it, at their leisure. I want to take the opportunity to thank you so much, Chris, for such an insightful session. We really appreciate your time and input. And thank you, everybody, for joining. So on to a couple of questions. One that I can answer straight away. There was a question of, there was a question raised when we were running through the AI applications that were currently available. And the question was, how is the system different from current Cority platform? You can learn about all of Cority's current AI capabilities on our website by typing in Cority Cortex AI into your favored search engine. So there's that one. A quick question for you, Chris, would be, what is an example of end-to-end automation within EHS, ideally?
Yeah, of course. So I think so. One example would be, so to clarify, we don't see this really in the market too much right now, but we know that vendors are striving to reach it. But end-to-end automation would be when AI is essentially owning the workflow from start to finish with relatively little or no human input. So an example could be, let's say AI's identified kind of root causes automatically off the back of an incident. Based on those root causes, it's then generating actions. And then off the back of those actions, it goes and automatically distributes those to owners and assigns deadlines and also manages the completion of them as well. That is something which could represent a kind of end-to-end ownership of that process. Of course, that sounds a little bit scary. The reality is humans will be in the loop for that. So at each stage, what the AI does, the human will review, click approve, and AI goes and automates it. Really, we're very much at a stage, though, where the vendors and also market analysts like ourselves are thinking about which processes in EHS are well suited to end-to-end automation. But we don't expect that to happen in the very near future.
Great answer. Okay, one more. Would it be possible to comment on the maturity of AI software? For example, making AI reviews of compliance content fit for use seems to be requiring a more traditional approach. So, broad question about where AI sits within EHS. I think the question would be, another question to ask would be, are there some things that you personally don't feel AI is fit for still, and that the traditional approach is better suited to where we stand today?
Okay, really good question. In terms of the example that was given, actually, I would say we're at a very, I think we're far enough on the maturity curve for AI to be extremely helpful in that kind of process. So anything that involves document review and trying to structure it or provide analysis on it, AI is well suited to. Also because quite often the solution involves kind of human in the loop and the ability to check AI outputs. What I would say is right now the market has converged on lots of narrow use cases, which I shared very early on in this presentation. For those, actually, we're at a stage where the technology is mature, it's been trialed at scale, and we can trust it fully. The movement towards more agentic and use of tools is more in the emerging phase. So I'd say there's trust here for certain agent use cases, and for others, it's emerging and it requires more human in the loop. But we have lots of research on this, so which use cases are trusted. So if there is any follow-up that's required there, we could provide more information.
And to get that information, you can all go to Verdantix directly, again, your favorite search engine, or if you're a Cority customer, you're interested in what is available within Cority, Cortex AI, Cority.com, you'll find everything you need. And with that, we are at the top of the hour. Once again, thank you all for joining this session. We really appreciate your time. And thank you again to Chris for running the session with us from Verdantix. Really appreciate your time as well.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks all. Have a great day.